Matt, in terms of some of the weirdest backgrounds in MMA, what could you have? Aikido, Hapkido, you could have Kung Fu. Dwight Grant has just that, and Dwight Grant, the Body Snatcher, welcoming the Nite Train, Jared Gooden, a long-awaited prospect to the UFC.
To Jason Aldean.
A guy that's 17-4, and he's only 26 years old, whereas Dwight Grant, coming in at 35, turns 36 in the next couple of months. It's an interesting fight overall, and if you look at Dwight Grant so far in his UFC tenure, comes in with an awesome fight on Dana White's Contender Series. Then he loses a split decision to Zach Otto in one of the worst fights I've seen in my entire life. If you thought Derek Lewis and Francis Ngannou isn't that good, and listen, UFC 252 broadcast, Joe Rogan forgot that fight happened. That's how bad it was, and he was there calling that in person. But Zach Otto, Dwight Grant was not that great. Then he comes in fighting Carlo Pedersoli. Pedersoli no longer in the UFC, but it was a good fight. And it was one of those ones where Pedersoli pushing the action. Dwight Grant, crazy flash knockout at the end of a round. And it earned him a Performance of the Night bonus. And then, in his last fight, a split decision win over Alan Jouban.
Oh, wait. You said the Zach Otto fight was the worst fight ever? Correction. The Alan Jouban fight might be worse. And that's my problem with Dwight Grant trying to take over. But Dwight Grant, every fight he's in, feels like he's fighting someone in the mirror. Because they know he's such a big, powerful athlete. Like, you watch that Pedersoli win, and it was Pedersoli goes for a head kick. Dwight Grant, there's an overhead right at the same time. And just kind of Pedersoli's momentum carried him around the punch. It looked like it was one of those crazy highlight reel knockouts. And it feels like, especially in the Alan Jouban fight, him and Jouban were so conscious of each other's power. Because Alan Jouban, say a lot of things about him. He is a phenomenal striker. He's got really accurate punches, good power. But they just kind of looked at each other the whole time. And no one wanted to throw anything just to risk getting knocked out. I understand that's the whole Francis Derek Lewis thing. But it's not like Dwight Grant really is the most murderous puncher at 170. It's not like you're fighting... If you're fighting Santiago Ponzinibbio and you don't want to, rush in, I don't blame you. He's probably going to knock you out. But with Dwight Grant, we've only really seen that one big highlight. And it always sounds like... With Dwight Grant, it feels like we're always hearing about what he can do and not what he has done. And at 36, you're not going to see that much more development out of his game. And he's not in Eric Silva levels of hype, because Eric Silva just, he has a lot more body of work than Dwight Grant does. But he's starting to get to that point where it's like, okay, what have you done for me lately? And nothing against him. He's a good striker. He can put out decent performances. It's just we haven't seen what Dwight Grant should be bringing to the table for a very long time.
And he's one of those guys, and I started it off this way, but he's got a background in Kung Fu and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So a good blend, especially against a lot of these guys at 170, where you see a lot of power, a lot of speed. You've got great ground games throughout. And for Jared Gooden, like I said, making his UFC debut, a guy that spent time at X3 Sports. So he's trained there. He spent a little bit of time at Fusion XL in Florida. And if you look at his overall body of work, he's on a tidy little win streak. I will say the one caveat, and he has been busy, but he lost to Bruno Oliveira by knockout or TKO a year and a month ago. Since then, he's won 3 in a row. Bruno Oliveira, if you don't know him, he's going to make an appearance on Dana White's Contender Series at the end of this month, coming up very shortly, actually. So then he submits Marcel Stamps. Then he beats Jay Jackson, who was 3-13. But, we're keeping busy. And then about 3 weeks ago, and it'll be about, 4 weeks plus to the day, he knocked out Trent McCallum. And really, if you want to take his losses into account, Bruno Oliveira was going to be on Contender Series. Mike Graves, who Titan FC welterweight champ and who's really fought some good names. So Jared Gooden's fought some decent talent on the regional scene. Very well-rounded, really good stand-up, good offensive wrestling. His takedown defense is one of those holes that you might want to shore up moving forward. But I think overall, a very complete fighter. This is where it gets a little odd, but I understand it. Dwight Grant, the UFC vet, he's favored here at about a -185. Open as a -205 favorite. So the line shifted a bit for Jared Gooden. Gooden coming in plus 155 underdog to his debut. And the really interesting thing about Jared Gooden, out of his 17 wins, 13 of them by finish, 7 by knockout, 6 by submission, adding to that well-roundedness. Now, both of these guys, I think they make for a really compelling fight. I think it's a lot more interesting than records on a page and a guy making his debut and getting over the hump of the older fighter. I think it should be a really interesting fight. What's your takeaway here?
So this fight could really go one of two ways. Because at this fight at its peak could be a fight of the night contender if both guys really bring it and it's not very hesitant on both sides. The bad version of this fight, I'm going to warn you now, is two guys just looking at each other for about 15 minutes.
Hopefully it's one guy playing chess and the other guy playing checkers and not both guys playing chess, because you don't want that.
No, exactly. But I do think Jared Gooden, the much more well-rounded of the two, like you had mentioned, and no matter where the fight goes, goes, I kind of favor him. On the feet, yes, Dwight Grant does have that big power, but he's more going to wait until you make a mistake. And I don't think Jared Gooden's going to really give him all that much respect where he's going to overanalyze what he's about to do and then open himself up for a big shot. So I'm actually going to go with the underdog on this one.
And a bit of a surprise because if you look over on Tapology, limited sample size, 242 votes, 85% going Grant, 59% going by way of decision. Again, Dwight Grant spent some time at the ATT and AKAs of the world, so he's had that top-level training type of partnerships. But for Jared Gooden, he's also spent, Fusion XL, you can't discount that, Jim. Adolfo Vieira, Jacare Souza spent time there. Yeah, Mikey Perry, but still, we move forward. I think Jared Gooden has a great path to victory. I'm really looking forward to this fight. Both going with the underdog, Jared Gooden. You're not going to want to miss the rest of our predictions for this card, including an extended look at our main event between Pedro Munhoz and Frankie Edgar. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. And as we always say, let's get into it.